It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome. It's the Jill on Money Show. This is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life, or it attempts to. The way we do that is we answer your financial questions. And sometimes the mystery can be about big trends in the economy. Some of these big trends are what we call macro trends, things that are happening, but we're also interested in the micro, like whatever's closest to you. So if you have a question about maybe education funding, or you have a question about retirement plan contributions, or maybe you're wondering whether it's time to downsize or rent versus buy, anything like that that's going on in your financial life, we'd love to hear from you. We have two ways to get in touch with us. One is our email address, askjill@jillonmoney.com. And if you're on our website, the jillonmoney.com website, we also have a contact button. All very easy to do. One other really neat thing, if you want to come on the air with us, if you want the opportunity to join us right here in the Sleep Number virtual studios, then let us know. We'll bring you on the air and Mark will do the rest. So do that. And, sometimes it does take a while for us to get back to your emails or read them on the air because we have so many. If you want to jump the line, all you have to do is say, I want to come on the air with you guys. And then you will get to the front. Do a lot of people do that, Mark? Do a lot of people say, I want to be on the air? More and more, because you know what? It's very easy. It's radio, gang. Like you can change your name and your location. We'll protect you. I will not do the whole voice thing. That's a very 60 Minutes thing, right, Mark? They either blur your name and change your voice. Not like that. We don't need to do that. All right. Here is a question from Lisa. And the subject is how to prepare for retirement now that we're married. Okay. So hello. I love your podcast. Oh, by the way, the podcast is a sister broadcast. We just answer tons of questions. We don't care where they come from. It could be from a column I write, the podcast, television appearance. I don't care where. So we have a sister podcast. It's called Jill on Money. If you want to get that, just go to the website and you'll see there's two podcasts there, Jill on Money, I on Money. Go get them. Okay. All right. Now let's get back to Lisa. Lisa recently found the podcast and she says, I've been listening nonstop. Okay. Lisa says, I got married a few weeks ago and I'm trying to figure out how to prepare for retirement now that I'm married and responsible for our finances. I'm 26 years old, annual salary, $95,000 a year. I have $64,000 in my 401k. Oh my God, she's 26 and she's already started to save like a maniac, which is great. She says all of that money is in a traditional 401k. They just got the Roth option, so that's great. She also has $25,000 in a Roth IRA. She says, I take advantage of my company match, and they give an extra 6% of my salary in addition to their 4% match. That's amazing. And she maxes her Roth IRA every year. Oh boy, here we go. My husband, on the other hand, makes $40,000 a year. He's got just $2,000 in a Roth IRA. He's self-employed. He's going to be taking over his dad's business in the next couple of years. And that's good because his income is going to increase to about $150,000. It's pretty amazing, right? 40 to 150. Within 5 years, he'll be closer to 200,000. I'm planning to max out his Roth every year while keeping up everything else I've been doing. Outside of retirement, we've got $4,000 in stocks, $16,000 in ETFs, exchange traded funds, cash socking away for a down payment, which will be in 4 to 5 years. Should I do anything different for retirement? Should I increase my retirement contributions or switch to a Roth 401k? Should I open a SEP 401k or something else? Okay, Lisa, definitely you should be doing, both of you guys should be doing all Roth all the time right now because your income is lower today than it will be in the future. So I would say absolutely, positively, all money in Roth for both of you. And I don't really think that there's any argument there. Mark, I think that what's going to be interesting is what the husband's retirement options will be. So what I would love to know is when your husband takes over this firm, he may be able to create a retirement plan for the company that makes more sense than just using a Roth IRA. So I think what we should do is give you an open invitation to stay in touch with us. And that way we can suggest some options for it's not self-employed because I don't know if it's a C Corp or an S Corp, and I don't know how many employees there are. But what you guys need to know is he'll have a ton of options for how to put retirement on the front burner in the company. I'm not so sure you should do it right this second because, it's not his company. Yeah, Mark said, we're not sure if you're maxing out your 401k, but again, once you move to that Roth option, absolutely max it out. You have good cash flow. And, it sounds like you've got, you're saving your money for the house. That's good. Don't be in such a rush, especially with your husband taking over in the business. There's going to be a lot of pressure on both of you. So I would really try to not necessarily rush into anything. Okay. Iris says, several years ago, you had a column in the section of my local newspaper, and I kept it and referred to it frequently. Mark, this is actually one of my most popular columns called, Keep It or Shred It. And people love this column. Anyway, the question is about all the information from Medicare. Is it necessary to keep all the information? I know it sounds silly, but I get so much paper from Medicare. And at age 89, I'm not quite as sharp as I used to be. Isn't that so nice? First of all, Medicare is insane with the amount of paper they send. I know this because I manage my mother-in-law's financial life, and you're right. So EOB is explanation of benefits. You know what I do? I look at it, I make sure it's right, and I shred it almost immediately. And most of the information is available in their system. So I would shred it and not worry about it. The other thing I would do, Iris, is there's a really interesting new website that I would love for you to check out. Mark, send this to her. This is the one from Steve Vernon called Thinking Ahead Roadmap. And what's interesting is there's a really important component of this that would really help you about how to choose a trusted financial advocate, how to organize your financial information, how to start a conversation with people. So, Mark, I'll send you the link and then maybe we can send it off to her because I think that would really be helpful. We're going to put in the resource section. Oh my God, Steve's going to have just the most exciting thing. Hold on. I'm sending it to you right now as we speak, Mark. And it is a really good resource. It really is. So we'll put that in our resources. So check that out. All right. Thank you for writing. All right. That's it. So now we get to go and take a little breather and take a little drink while we go to the break. While you go to the break, send us your questions. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
.401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. This is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. But the only way we can do that is if you send us your questions. So shoot us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. And if you are on the website, perhaps because you are checking out all the great resources that Mark has up there, or maybe you're reading the columns that I've been writing for Tribune or for my own website, or maybe you're listening to old shows, whatever it is, at jillonmoney.com, our website, guess what? You you can just hit the contact button if you happen to have any questions. If you want to jump the line, all you need to do is say, I want to come on this show live with you. And then Mark does the rest. It's very easy. So tell us if you want to come on live. You'll join us right here, right now, in the Sleep Number virtual studios. And that is what Brian did. He is on the line from New York. Hello, Brian. What can we do for you?
My wife and I, we were taking the FIRE approach, but now we're taking the FINE approach, FINE. I learned that new one, financial independent, new endeavor from you guys.
Right.
We're taking that path. And basically, we're both working and doing our thing, but my wife wants to sort of call it quits from her full-time employment in the next 2 or 3 years. And I disagree, thinking she needs to continue to work another 5 or 6 years. I'm not a budgeter. I don't know the numbers, and I'm here to see what you guys can pick apart from all this.
Okay. First of all, tell us how old you are, how many kids you have, what else is going on?
So I'm 45 and my wife is 40. We have a 9-year-old and we have a 3-year-old.
Right now, how much do each of you earn?
So she earns about 165, usually gets about a 30 to 40 bonus, and I'm making 122.
Are you both contributing to retirement accounts?
Yes, maxing them out.
You're both maxing them out. Okay. So 19.5 in each of them. Any other savings that's going on, like 529 plans or Roths or anything else that's out there?
Yes. So we are both maxing out our Roth IRAs, but we have to do the backdoor approach. And I also have a 457, which we also do another 19.5, and I'm maxing that out as well.
Wait, so you're putting 19.5 into your 403B and 19.5 into your 457 plan?
And another 6,000.
And 6 in your Roth? Oh, yeah. My goodness, you're very good. So you work for a state or some sort of municipal organization. Your wife, is she in a 401k?
She has the 401k, yep.
Okay. How much money is in each of these accounts? Let's start with your 403B.
My 403B has 375,000 in it, and it's in a 7% guaranteed fixed.
Oh, you're a school teacher.
Yeah.
That's an amazing deal. That is like that, by the way, it's the only time I say that go into 100% fixed. It is unbelievable.
So that's my security blanket, which is why I don't have a bond allocation, nothing like that. So that's the 403B.
Great.
The 457 I started about 2 years ago. That's all in equities. There's about 73,000 in there.
Great.
The Roth IRA has about 250,000.
So that's for Brian. And now wife, how much is in her retirement account? How much is in her 401k and how much is in her backdoor?
So her current 401k with her current employer has about 225 in it. That's a combination of pre-tax and Roth. She recently started going full Roth 401k with the future contributions.
Great.
She did from her previous employer a rollover from the 401k, which is now sitting at traditional IRA, which has about 165. And then actually in 2020, though, she pulled 50 out of there and did the Roth conversion. So she has about 90 now in the Roth IRA.
And 165 remains in the traditional?
Yes, with a little bit. I know you've said before not to commingle deductible, non-deductible money in an account, but if she's going to continue to contribute to the Roth IRA, so she's got some basis in the traditional.
Oh, someone's going to keep track of that. I hope it's not you.
My dad, he's a CPA.
Oh, sweet. All right. Your dad's a CPA. This is awesome. Fantastic. Okay, good. For you, how many years do you have in the system? Because you're going to have a pension. What do you have into the system so far?
Approaching 22 years.
Wow. And are you a lifer? Like you think, wow, I want to stay here for as long as I can? Or are you going to, are you the type who says, oh, isn't it 30 or 35 where you kind of max out? I forgot.
Yes, that's the whole thing. I have to do 30 years to get that full pension. Otherwise, you take a major hit and a penalty. And basically, if you do your 30 years, and as long as you're age 55, you collect approximately 60% of your final average salary. However, that's calculated on average best 3 years.
Right.
And also at 55, you're collecting health benefits for your lifetime.
So you're thinking 10 years for sure, right?
Till age 55. And then after that, we'll see.
Okay, got it. That's a nice base to have, right? I mean, presuming your salary will increase a certain amount every year, but that is a good solid base for you guys. So you save a blank ton of money. You don't make that much money. So how are you doing this on 325 grand a year?
I don't know. I mean, we don't budget or anything, but if you're maxing out these retirement accounts, kind of whatever's left over, you just live on, and we seem to still be in the black with that.
That's great. So tell me about living. Where are you living and what's going on?
So I'm in one of the boroughs of New York City, and I have, we have 2 cooperative apartments, which are sort of in the same complex, and we both own one. We both each own one, which we owned prior to marriage. So I've kept the second apartment, and my in-laws are now living in that apartment while we live in the other apartment.
So is this because you love them or because they need to be in those? You know what I'm saying? Like, is this because we just all love each other, or are you helping them? Are they paying you rent or what's going on?
Well, we love them. They are from a European country, and they first came to this country about 5 years ago.
Wow. And are they paying you rent for the co-op?
No, we're taking care of it.
Okay. And the co-ops, how much are they worth, and what are the mortgage balances? What's going on with those?
The co-op under my wife's name is probably worth about $575, and only about $25,000 remains on the mortgage balance.
Holy smokes! Okay.
And the other apartment, we'll call it at $300, and the mortgage is paid off.
I have to say that I'm stunned about how much saving you guys have done. I really am. It's amazing. And I'll tell you why. For everyone else listening, this is a very interesting story to be told, because it appears to me, at least, that you are just saving a ton of money, which, it's about $72,000 a year in your various retirement accounts. You've whittled down mortgages. You're pretty young. And so when you first set this up, like my wife wants to call it quits in 2 to 3 years and try something new, I was like, that's ridiculous. And now that I'm hearing the numbers, it's not that ridiculous. Are you putting money into 529 plans for the kids?
So for the older one, there's, I want to say there's about 40 in the 529, and I already started doing a 529 for the other guy, and there's about 27 in there. And I'm going to front load that you get it up to 10,000 state tax deduction.
Right.
Here. So we're doing 5 and 5. So we max out the state tax deduction each year. And then after a few years, it's in an aggressive fund, and it's age-based, like a target date fund. So I'll do another few years maxing that out, and then I'll let it sit and let it grow.
Let it go. Okay, we're going to get back to Brian in a second. This is going to be a little bit more time consuming, and and not everybody gets the answer in exactly the time allotted to a single segment. So give us a shout. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and if you have any sort of financial issue that's on your mind, we'd love to hear from you. The email address, askjill at jillonmoney.com. And our website, jillonmoney.com, it's got a neat contact button. Just click it and you will be able to reach us. Want to remind you that we are sponsored by Facet Wealth. Facet Wealth provides financial planning to lots of different kinds of people, maybe to you. And they do that with flat fee, conflict-free planning. You get a CFP, a certified financial planner. That person is a fiduciary looking at your best interest first. And also the folks at Facet, they conduct goal-based financial planning. So that's kind of a cool thing. No wealth or account minimums. If you want some more information, hop on to facetwealth.com. And now we are going back to our friend Brian, who is trying to figure out how to talk to his wife about how she wants to change her career trajectory. If you look at your wife's income right now and you say 165 base, 30, 40 grand in bonus, what is it you think she'd want to do differently in 2 to 3 years? What do you think that looks like for that new endeavor?
So this is what I've learned recently. She's looking at rental properties. She's been looking, and she's on Zillow looking down in Orlando and looking at properties, but we would need a mortgage for that. And it comes up on Zillow, and 5 minutes later, it's like taken down because there's cash buyers. So reality is she wants to venture into getting a rental property. And okay, that's fine. But the way I see it, that's sort of an iffy game. And you're taking on new debt where if you continue to work, you have your income and you continue your contributions to your retirement accounts.
Does she hate what she does?
No. What happened is with the pandemic, they're home. Mm-hmm. And now coming to the end of the pandemic, probably come September, it's back to the office. So I feel for her because I think that's going to be a tough transition for a lot of people that now have to go back to the office.
Sure. Okay. So I have 2 observations about this. The rental thing she can do anyway if she wants to. And she's actually it would be much easier for her to pursue that while she has a job. That is not a job, by the way. That's not a job. That is like a little avocation in the hottest housing market since the big housing boom and bust. So it's a terrible time to get into that business because you would have wanted to get into it 3 years ago, right? Now, prices are already up. And by the way, any sort of mortgage you would get for rental property is it is a different rate. It's a higher rate, and it's tough. And like if you have, you're managing 2 properties right now, which you're actually, it's really not managing 2 properties. You're essentially managing like one big household for both of you, and her parents, and it's right nearby. And doing something remotely is a whole different business. So here's what I would suggest in terms of how she thinks about this. If you're going to really pursue doing something like, hey, I want to be a landlord, the first thing you start to do is you accumulate a slush fund. How much is in your emergency reserve fund right now?
About $40K.
Okay. And that's right, probably the right amount. And is there any other money that you have that's invested that is outside of retirement?
She has brokerage of about $80,000, and I just started a little brokerage with about $15,000.
Okay. If she wants to get into, the world of rental properties, the way to do it is to first establish that you have a bunch of money that you can use for down payments. The second thing is you start doing massive amounts of research. And the third is that she's going to have to figure out a way to do this. Is she a numbers person?
She works in risk management. I see spreadsheets on her screen all the time. So
there you go. So she's familiar with that. And she has to run the numbers. To me, right now, you guys are in an incredible financial position to do something different. And by the way, the whole reason you are in that mode is that like you've been diligent, you're amazing, right? I mean, you got all this money that's saved, you will have this pension. And, frankly, the pension gives her the ability to essentially pursue something different. It really does, because it's the pension plus the healthcare, right? Those 2 things really do give you a great advantage. I would be interested to find out, like if we were to run your numbers, where you would turn up if you both kind of said, all right, well, I'm going to, let's say that she goes from at age 45, maybe that give you 5 years to like really accumulate some money. Instead of 2 to 3 years, make it 5 years. What would she feel like, if you said, well, we can't retire in the same way and have the same flexibility if you make this choice today. But in 5 years, we might have far more choices than we would have right now if we were to do the same thing. You're probably living, my guess is, on 10 grand a month. That's my guess. You don't have a ton of expenses, right? But you do really, you seem to be saving quite easily, and you don't have any other debt, right?
No, no debt.
I think you should be running some retirement numbers. I presume, look, if I ran your numbers till your age 55 and her age 50, I know that it would be great. I know it would be great. Because you know what? For 10 more years, just think about how much money you're putting away and you're going to have a pension. I think if you ran retirement numbers, I would run it at $10,000 a month of net, meaning that's what you need to live on. I'm pretty sure that's about what you're doing right now. Maybe it's a little more. I don't know. Do you have any other aspirations in terms of like, well, no, we're not spending that much money now, but we really will be more in the future because we're going to travel more. Like, do you think things will change a lot or not?
We're here for 10 years, and then we talk about where do New Yorkers go after they retire? They go to Florida. So to lead into that, it's like we're doing a lot of Roth stuff now, but maybe should we be doing more pre-tax if we're going down there and you do conversions when there's no state income tax? Because
yeah, I mean, that's one thing. The other thing would be that maybe you do Roth conversions. If she changes her career, if she really does in 3 years say, I'm calling it quits, then you could do the conversions here also, and you'll have much less income, right?
Another big thing about the conversion, that 5-year rule, once you convert, you're unlocking that money from the 10% penalty. I know you don't want to touch Roth, you want to let it grow, but
right.
In my mind, why not free up money just in case?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Okay, if you or your spouse or someone you know and love wants a new career, can you make it work financially? Send us an email, ask Jill at jillonmoney.com, and we'll help you figure it out. We'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And, you know, this is one of those questions, we're talking to Brian in New York, that it's so well suited for being with us live. And the reason is that, you know, there's a lot of different details that come up. And that's why I want to encourage you that when you're sending us your questions about your personal financial life, that you then say, hey, I want to come on the air with you. Because when you come on the air with us, we can ask follow-up questions. We can kind of dig around and see what's the story behind the story. And that's what you're going to hear in this next part of our conversation with Brian. He's the guy. Now, if you're just joining us, you missed a bunch, but Brian is from New York. His wife wants to basically call it quits, stop working, and maybe become a professional in the real estate industry. I don't know. But what I wanted to understand was what was causing this whole change of heart. Is there something that happened? Is this a pandemic-related issue? Is it a personal issue? I wasn't sure. And that's one of the reasons that I was very happy that Brian could join us in the broadcast from the Sleep Number virtual studios. Sleep Number, smart, effortless comfort, just like that. Okay, here is the conclusion of our conversation with Brian from New York. I think to the core issue for you guys, it has to be that she really starts to figure out what is it about this that's causing me to have the change of heart, right? She works in finance, you said, and I think that a lot of people who work in the industry, I have, friends and relatives who are all grappling with the same thing. I was with a bunch of people last night for dinner, and it was very interesting. People who said, like, you know what? I'd leave my job at fancy XYZ bank and go to the bank that's not as prestigious if I have flexibility. And so, maybe instead of it feels very dramatic to say at age 40, right after I've had this crazy thing called a pandemic, to really blow my life up. I would much prefer her to try to say, hey, you know what I really would like to do? I think I'd like to go to a different institution where I have more flexibility. And then instead of working and making 200 grand a year, I'd be happy making 150 because I would be in a hybrid environment. And then I could work for 5 or 8 more years. I just feel like this is a little dangerous time to make such a dramatic choice. That's what I think.
I agree with that. Thanks, Jill.
Mark, do you want to do anything else for these folks? I presume you have your wills and you've done your power of attorney and all that stuff.
We have a lot of moving parts in terms of how to get the estate. In the fact we have in-laws, I have a stepdaughter, there's a father in the picture. So it's like a lot of moving parts. So we haven't tied it up yet.
So do you have a lawyer?
I have a friend. He actually, that's top priority this summer is to reach out to him. He does estate planning, and we're going to get this done.
All right, good. Bang it out. Because that's obviously a hole that's missing. I'm going to tell you what, if you wanted to get some ammunition, what I would do is I would start running some numbers and really looking at what would happen if. The big metric here is what would happen if we went from, could we live on my income alone, your income alone, meaning you probably could, just couldn't save as much money. Then if you run the numbers, you can give her the proof and then say, look, here's how the numbers shake out. If you want to go into your next endeavor and it's running rental properties, there's no way you're going to replace her income. We need to replace this much of your income to live the life we want to live and hit our retirement numbers. You're really gunning towards 10 more years in doing something. And if you look at that and you say 10 years, honey, you're 40, that's age 50. You'd be really young. You'd be doing whatever you want. Or if you say to her, you know what, if you don't want to work and you want a more of a remote environment, you want to do something different, then, we have flexibility. We might not have flexibility for you to do anything you want. You got to do something where you're going to make some money and we can still save some money. Because again, if you look at your expenses and you say 10 or 12 grand a month is what we think we need to live on, right? Something like that, 120 to 150 grand a year. And you stop working when you at age 55, you then have to finance that much money, right? Until you're say 95. Now, great. Thank you very much to New York. You're going to be able to get, let's say 60 grand a year. There's going to be some Social Security for each of you. You don't have to fund that big a differential, but there is going to be something you have to fund. And the funding of that is predicated on what you guys are doing today. I don't know. I just want to figure out where this is all coming from for her. Is this just like fear of change, of going back? Is that really what this is?
I think it's because she's always been interested in the real estate stuff, and I think part of it is because she's into it. The same way I'm into this retirement plans and figuring out 457s and 401k. She's into the real estate stuff. I don't want any part of the real estate stuff.
I'm going to wish you the very best of luck. I feel like this is going to be a tough conversation, man. It's funny. When I first read your email, I thought she was making a lot more money. I mean, so you framed it and you've saved so much money. So there is a situation where I can see a new endeavor. It's just, she's young. She's really young. Well, all right. That is yet another happy contestant. All right. Just kidding. But it is another person who has used this community and used the Jill on Money show to help work a few issues out. It doesn't solve everything, but we do try to kind of unveil where those issues arise. So during the break, maybe you think about what's on your mind and send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. And before we conclude hour number 1 of this fine broadcast, we wanted to make sure that we snuck in an extra email. So this is from Ray, who writes about whole life insurance. Whole life insurance, it's a form of permanent life insurance. It stays in force for your whole life. Okay. So Ray says, I have a $50,000 whole life insurance policy with a cash balance currently at $20,000. I've had this policy for 35 years. I've been paying $105 per month. I now have enough money to live on and to pass on to my kids. Should I keep the policy or cash it in? Well, here's the thing. You've got this policy you don't really need. So I certainly wouldn't pay any more for it. I think that you just want to make sure that if you're going to cash it in, that you understand there could be a tax liability. So if you make sure that before you actually pull the plug and you just either pull a little bit of extra money aside and do that, that's fine. For everyone listening, I mean, you can have these policies for a really long time and they're useful for some period, but then not. And isn't this the best example of that? Because essentially, for 35 years, he's also been saving and investing. And now, guess what? I've saved more than I need to cover my life insurance concerns. So I don't need this policy anymore. That's really what the argument of term life insurance has always been in my mind, that you probably only need it for a specific period of time or a term, which is why I think for a lot of people, buying those whole life insurance policies that are really expensive don't make a ton of sense. But if you have a question about life insurance, if you've got an old policy, let's figure out what to do with it. All you need to do is send us an email. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. Let me do that again. askjill@jillonmoney.com. If you are on our website, the jillonmoney.com website, just click the contact button and we'll get your message. Very easy to do. So send us that note and we will respond. Don't forget to tell us if you want to come on the air live. Mark does all the hard work around that. All you have to do is show up and tell us your story. Okay, we'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome back. It is hour number 2 of the Jill on Money show. This is the program where we attempt to take the mystery out of your personal financial life. But we also like to bring you engaging and really interesting guests. And today I am glad to have one. We are so happy to have author, academic Leidy Klotz. Leidy has written a book called Subtract, The Untapped Science of Less. And it's kind of cool because what he does is he really talks about this strange phenomenon where we always talk about adding and having more and doing more instead of thinking about maybe less. So we're going to talk to him in just a second. And I bet that this notion of what you can subtract is a really particularly interesting notion for our friends over at Facet Wealth. Facet Wealth is the organization that provides financial planning to pretty much anyone, and they do it with a flat fee, conflict-free planning platform. You get a certified financial planner who may show you that you don't always need more. Sometimes you just need a little less. So go check them out at facetwealth.com. Okay, so let's start with our interview with Leidy Klotz. Can you talk a little bit about the human inclination to add things and why that can lead us astray sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, long story short is after tens of thousands of hours of research that I did with collaborators, I mean, we found that the way our brain works is we default to thinking about what we can add to a situation. And it's not just closets, right? When we encounter a situation, whether it's your room, whether it's your portfolio, whether it's your to-do list or your calendar for the week, our first instinct is to think, hey, what can we add to this thing to make it better? And oftentimes we add and keep going. And it takes more effort to think of subtraction. It's not that we can't subtract, but left to our own devices, we often, kind of succumb to this default tendency, which is to think about adding first and then move on, which can be damaging. That's the first chapter of the book. And then knowing that this is happening, how do you investigate it? What might be the biological reasons, cultural reasons, and economic reasons for it too?
Can you explain or at least tell the story about the Lego story with your kid and
Yeah.
also weave in a little bit of the fact that you started your life as a civil engineer. And so I have a brother-in-law and a father-in-law who are civil engineers, and I found this fascinating. So I immediately sent your book over to my brother-in-law to read. So talk a little bit about the Lego and civil engineering and your background and how that has played into your research.
Yeah, I mean, so I came to this not from a pure behavioral science standpoint. I'm an engineer by training and designer, and so I think about big objects, civil engineering, bridges and highways and buildings in particular. I'd always like kind of like the minimalist modern designs, right? Hey, that building looks really cool, and what looks cool about it is the fact that it's not ornate, right? It doesn't have all these bells and whistles. It's just really stripped down. The form follows the function, as they say. I was always curious about like, why doesn't that happen more, right? Why aren't there more like cool examples like that out there in the world? And so subtracting is obviously one way to get there. I didn't really realize that until we kind of layered the behavioral science on top of the engineering background. And one of the epiphany that my son, who's now 6, is getting famous for. So he walks into his school and he's like, I am teaching the world how to subtract, which is hilarious because and this is a totally true story, but you couldn't make up a better origin story for the book. He was 3 at the time, and we were building with Legos, which he does a lot of. I think any kid does, especially one whose father is an engineer. So we're building with Legos, and we're making a bridge basically. And the problem we had was the bridge wasn't level. And so one of the columns was longer than the other column. So I went to improve the situation, which is the fundamental thing we're talking about here, by adding a block. So I turned around behind me to grab a block. By the time I had turned back around, my 3-year-old had removed a block from the longer column and solved the problem in the same way. And like I said, I'd always been interested in like kind of this end state, these like elegant designs, but had never been able to like boil it down to that act of taking something away. That was not just a mental epiphany for me, but then I could literally carry the Lego bridge around. And that's actually how I convinced one of my collaborators, Gabe Adams, to work with me on this, because I had been talking to Gabe and she had just kind of never bit. It was that sounds neat, Leidy, but I'm not going to spend my time on it. But then I brought the Lego bridge to her and set it down on her desk, asked her to solve it. I thought she would subtract because she's a genius, and I thought I'd been talking to her about subtracting, but she added like I did. And then when I said, hey, look, this is what Ezra did, and she said, oh, so what you're thinking about is like, why don't we subtract as a way to make things better? And that's like the jumping off point for the research and for the book.
And it's so interesting because, I mean, you sort of start this about the Embarcadero freeway story, which I found really interesting because I forgot that the story, which was there was this kind of ugly, disgusting thing and it was up. And then after that horrible earthquake in the late 80s, this whole desire to get rid of it. And then after it took this terrible earthquake because this whole thing pancaked down on itself. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait, this woman who had the idea of like, let's get rid of it. She was right. But it took that. So I'm wondering, okay, so I'm talking to you from the Upper West Side in New York. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I sort of abut the old West Side Highway that has this old sort of structure above, but they won't get rid of it. And it drives me insane why we don't get rid of it. It really does. And I said like, oh, all I need is like some horrible thing happening and that's why we get rid of it. But why is it so? Is it costly to take it down? Like what happens? What's the pushback? I don't really get it because it's sort of like everyone's like, oh, this is an eyesore. But why not get rid of it?
The issue there is not we didn't think of it, right? And so like the science that I just talked about that, was in my Nature paper and starts the book is that like, hey, oftentimes we don't think of it. But then subtracting faces a battle. Even when we do think of it, it's harder to follow through with in a lot of ways. And I think, we like things that we have, right? Once we've been given something, we assign more value to it than if we never had it in the first place. And so, change is hard, and it's hard to take things away and to see that as an improvement. One of the things that can become helpful there is like, envisioning what the the future state would look like. What Marie Kondo does with our closets, for example, is she kind of flips it around so that people aren't focused on losing the things, right? The clutter. She paints this picture in their head for them of this beautiful decluttered space that you're going to achieve if you follow her steps. And by doing that, she kind of flips it around so that what you're losing in that case is not the physical object, but that kind of visionary end state. So I don't know, maybe, in the absence of an earthquake in New York City, Jill, you could figure out a way to kind of portray the West Side Highway without that, and, paint a picture and get that out into the world. And then people will feel like they're losing that if they don't take it down. But it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to subtract, even when we do think of it.
We'll get back to Leidy Klotz in just a second. During the break, hop onto the website, jillonmoney.com, and there you can check out all the great content that we post all the time. You can read stuff. You can listen to old shows. We don't care. Check it out, jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
.401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are in the middle of a pretty cool interview. This is author Leidy Klotz. We found Leidy because of a fun connection through another author named Katie Milkman. So these behavioral scientists must all hang out at bars together, and that's how we find them. Anyway, clearly there is some notion that we all have that more is better, right? But in this book and in his research, Leidy Klotz really has found that a different way of approaching problem solving could be to subtract, not to just keep adding. And in this part of the interview, we discuss why so many of us are inclined to think more is better. I know, could be you, could even be me. So here's the next part of our interview with Leidy Klotz. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned this briefly just before. You said something about, investing. So this is a show that is called Jill on Money. We talk a lot to investors, and oftentimes we'll talk to people and they're like, well, I have, 72 different mutual funds in my portfolio.
Right.
We will often say, like, really? You need four? Four's plenty. And there is often a pushback. So what's a good way for me to try to break through that with people who are struggling with it?
One of these things that kind of holds us back is this desire to show competence, right? And, we think of that in terms of, oh, I'm at work. I want my boss to see I'm like going to this meeting, or I want to, when I write my book, for example, it's like there's tens of thousands of words that didn't make it into the book. And it was painful to get rid of those because I wrote them. I wanted somebody to see that I wrote them, even though it didn't like serve the book. So we have this innate desire to display competence, and it's actually surprisingly deeply ingrained on this, like bowerbirds who build the ceremonial nests. They do this. The male bowerbirds will build a ceremonial nest, and the female bowerbirds will go around and decide which male to mate with based on which ceremonial nest is the best. And then the female bowerbirds go and build a nest to provide shelter for their kids. All that's happening there is the male bowerbird is displaying competence, showing that they're genetically fit to kind of act on the world around them. And I think, the portfolio is kind of the same thing, right? It's like you've got, well, if 4 stocks or 4 mutual funds is good, then 75 mutual funds, I must be really competent if I have 75 mutual funds. So I think kind of like breaking down that feeling that like, hey, just adding more is a way to show competence. And in fact, 4 is, I think you probably help your listeners with that by explaining why 4 is in fact basically equivalent to 75 in terms of how diversified you are, and also easier to manage. And so it's like flipping it around so that this streamlined less is actually a better version of competence. I think one other thing to remember there is that it's harder to show competence by subtracting. If you take away one mutual fund from 75 down to 74, it's like nobody's even going to notice the difference in what you did there. But if you take away from 75 down to 4, then it's like, oh, that's a really streamlined portfolio. This person must really know what they're doing. And so one of the lessons in the book is, this happens in all different areas, is like people who subtract effectively and keep persisting with their subtracting, like do so beyond the point of just like good enough, but to get even better, often are able to show their competence through less.
There's a few things in the book that really popped out at me. First of all, like, I love that you sort of sprinkle in some of the creative people in here, whether it's Picasso or, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. The elimination of the unnecessary is what Picasso said. And the Little Prince's author said, perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. Chinese philosopher, subtract things every day. So there is something that is, I guess, in the brains of some of these really creative and deep thinking folks that they're trying to tell us something here, and yet it's very difficult to do. So you say that we've got to start subtracting consciously. How do we do that?
That's the value proposition of the book. I mean, that's why I felt like I should write it, is because if people understand why this is happening, then it can help make it so we don't need a quote for every single situation in our lives, right? I mean, and Marie Kondo's like telling us the same thing for our closet. Cal Newport's, helping us with our digital lives, reminding us to subtract. And so, hopefully the book kind of rearranges your mental furniture so that you're always thinking about this as an option. But should you not have time for that, you can, one thing is to subtract first. Why this works, I mean, that seems obvious, right? But oftentimes what I talked about with the fundamental issue in our thinking here is that we add and then move on without even considering subtraction. So if you're able to kind of shift your mindset so that you always subtract first, or at least just consider subtracting first, then you've kind of overcome the thinking obstacle there. I mean, then you've still got to figure out ways to implement it, which is challenging. And then the other thing is to put in place cues. And this is one of the things from our experiments where we would remind people to add, that they could add or subtract. The reason we did it in our experiments was to show that, then when this reminder, which reminded people of both, what happened was it increased the rates of subtracting. And it's like, well, big deal. It's a reminder. Of course, it increased the rates of subtraction, but it didn't increase the rates of adding, which was great because it showed the adding reminder was redundant with what people were already thinking. The subtracting reminder was bringing new ideas to mind, which is what we showed in our paper. But, flip that around. It's like, well, I can provide cues for myself in my life to remind myself to subtract, right? So when I do my to-do list each week, I also force myself to think of stop doings. And so that reminder prevents me from overlooking subtracting in that situation. And I think, if you're thinking about it in terms of money management or anything, you could think about, okay, as I sit down to make this decision, or as I'm thinking about this decision, what cue could I put in place to remind myself to take away? So those are.
Wait a second. I want to know what you take away. Like, give me an example. Like, I'm going to just look at my list right here. Hold on. I totally have a list right here, and I love crossing off a physical list. So I'm old.
Yeah.
Okay. And I really do. There's something sick about it. It just feels like I've accomplished something. But I'm looking at this and I'm trying to see, what could I cross off? Like, what would
no, it's more than crossing off. So this is the same mistake my friend Ben made, who like worked with me on the research forever, and then like halfway into the research he came to me and he said, "Hey, I'm doing it. I'm taking our research to heart. My department chair tried to put me on this committee and I said I didn't have time." And I said, that's great, Ben. You didn't add, but you didn't subtract. And so a stop doing is actually saying like, okay, this is a thing that's on my calendar right now, like weekly or, for this upcoming week, or this thing that I'm just routinely doing, and I don't need to do it anymore. And so like for me, a really helpful stop doing was intermittent email checking is what I called it basically. So checking email once a day. And that was incredibly helpful, and it involves the intermittent email checking. So that was
God.
fun.
You know what? This is the thing. Newport was on our show. He's been on it with us for 2 or 3 different times.
Right. Yeah.
I am so goddamned compulsive. I can't take a walk with my dogs, okay, and not check my email like 5 times on that walk.
It's hard. Yeah. Take it off your phone so that you don't look at it. But I mean, what's to be subtracted is different for everybody. I mean, maybe you just like checking your email 5 times on your walk with your dogs.
No, it's not. It's compulsive. It's
Yeah.
sort of like, in the 90s when I was a money manager and a wealth manager. And, I'd have these clients who worked at, technology companies. Tech boom was going crazy. And it cracked me up. They were checking their company stock price 100 times a day. And I said, well, what do you think that's going to do? And it's sort of, I say the same thing to myself, but I'm so flawed because I'm a human being and it's really hard. Okay, we'll get back to our interview with Leidy Klotz in just a moment. During the break, how about if you go and check out JillOnMoney.com, and there you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter. JillOnMoney.com, free weekly newsletter. Kind of cool. Check it out. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we're about to conclude our interview with Leidy Klotz. And Leidy is the author of a new book called Subtract, the Untapped Science of Less. I was thinking about this because so often I hear from you, from the folks out there who are managing people who are being managed, and there's it's almost like a lack of communication sometimes. And what I think most of us really want to know is how we can do more by actually not working quite as hard, that less can actually be more. And in this concluding part of the interview, we talk a little bit about that because I think that one of the lessons of the pandemic could be that more is not more. It really isn't. And it's not actually helping you or your organization. So here is the concluding part of our interview with Leidy Klotz. I want to ask you about the idea of, if you're a manager, like if I want to give feedback to somebody, I'm the boss, or even if I'm the person creating it, how do I make the argument that less is more, even though that's like annoying to say, but like you have to be crisper in your communication to create something that is shorter. And that's why I think subtraction is so interesting, especially in the kind of work that I do.
I mean, one is getting outside help, right? I mean, one of the reasons it's hard to subtract, especially for the stuff that we've created, is that we become attached to it, right? And so that's why, professional editors and those people are so helpful, right? Because they can be this external neutral observer who says, yeah, this stuff's great and this other thing not so much, let's take it out. So getting external help is really, really good there. One of the other things we do as managers, right, is try to add incentives to make things better. And this is another area where like removing barriers can often be a more useful thing to do. The example I wish I used in the book, which I didn't come up with until after, was there's research that shows that like taking a TV out of the bedroom leads to more intercourse in the bedroom. And so like you could imagine all kinds of incentives to try to get people towards the behavior that you want in that case. But actually the best thing to do is to remove a barrier. And so I think as managers, we want to make things better, right? And then it's intuitive to try to add, to say, hey, what incentive can we put in place? What kind of, punishment can we put in place? But oftentimes the best thing to do is to think about, okay, what's the barrier here, and how can we get rid of that? Yeah.
What else about, I love this term that you use, conscious mental pruning. And what you mean by that is what you said earlier, which is, you basically remind yourself that you can add and you can subtract. We're coming out of this horrible COVID 16, 17, 18 months, right? People keep learning these lessons. They say, oh, I don't want to forget this. And I mean, I'm not saying we should live like we are cloistered and,
Right.
socially distanced forever, but What aspect of that do you want people to consciously consider in their post-COVID lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different for everybody. So I hate to be prescriptive, but, for me, work travel, it's just made it so obvious that 90% of my work travel was unnecessary. Like we jet off to these conferences to be in a room that, there's 1,000 other people who work on the same research as me, and I don't actually talk to them. I just listen to them. And I've had better connections to my professional networks over Zoom, not to mention like the time impacts, the health risks to flying all over the place, plus the climate change impact. So I think like not just automatically going back to all the exact same travel that we were doing and thinking about what we really care about in that case is like the human connection and what's the best way to create this human connection. We've been shown that there are multiple ways to have that connection. And of course, like going back to in-person visits with grandparents, but I'm not going back to some of these work conferences. So that's one. And I think the ideas is so important. I mean, that's my favorite subtracting quote, is the one that's attributed to Lao Tzu that you mentioned before, is to attain knowledge, you add things every day. To attain wisdom, you subtract things every day. It's 2.5 millennia old and still rings true and counterintuitive. And I think, we've been forced to kind of really rethink some things. This is embarrassing to share, but I mean, for me, like I knew the world wasn't a level playing field before the pandemic, but I think that the extent to which it's not level became really striking to me during the pandemic. So like kind of unthinking this idea of, okay, everybody starts out with a fair shake and the system is basically working as we want it to work. I mean, that has been kind of removed from my mental model. And so I think, paying attention, it may not be the same thing for everybody, but paying attention to what ideas have been subtracted during the pandemic and at all times is perhaps the most powerful way to make use of this tool.
I was interested in subtracting for the following. And I know that this sounds a little bit, how shall we say, pessimistic. But remember, I am the New Yorker, so I have to just kind of grab hold of that and embrace it. I was thinking about all these extraneous relationships that are exhausting to maintain, that don't feed you. I had a friend many years ago who would say to me, like, you have all these people in your life. And she goes, you should just surround yourself with people who water your garden, that like are just there for you, who help you grow. Mm-hmm. And you shouldn't be like working so hard. I mean, there are certain things we have to do, right? There are certain social obligations for sure, family obligations for sure. But that the vast majority, if you just say no, thank you, it's actually going to make you happier. So I took from this book 2 things. One was that the subtraction is also, you're allowed to say no, thank you. And you can kind of not like break up with a friend, but, like limit the time that you're spending with people who really aren't helping you or who are not helping you, but like feeding your soul in some way. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I also thought about my work life, which is the mental pruning, the amount of time that I spend on certain things that don't really serve me or the mission that Mark and I have for our shows, right? That like, I can't keep just adding more stuff into the mix without figuring out to give myself and to ourselves some relief. So I think that those were 2 things that really stuck with me. I feel like I sort of knew that, but the way that you put it together and you sort of, I don't know, you were like the connective tissue that you provided was really helpful. So I so appreciate that. Well, thanks so much to Leidy Klotz. The book is called Subtract, the Untapped Science of Less. I think you should check it out. This is sort of in the vein of the behavioralists that I love, like Cal Newport and Katie Milkman, just people who use common sense, but also have the science underneath it. All right, so check it out. Jill on Money. We'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. Mark's going to probably mute out the dog barking in the background, but that's my dog barking in the background. Trixie would like to encourage all of you to send us your financial questions. Really, just as quickly as you possibly can right now. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Or if you're on the website, jillonmoney.com, just click the contact button and we would be delighted to take it from there. If you want to skip the line, you want to get a speedy response, tell us if you'd like to come on the air live. Then you can join us here at the Sleep Number Virtual Studios. Sleep Number, smart, effortless comfort. Okay. Oh, by the way, a little Sleep Number issue in my own life. I need a much lighter weight comforter. What do you got, Mark? I need a very lightweight one. I need a over 50-year-old woman one. Anyone have a suggestion? Very, very, very lightweight because I'm schwitzing like crazy. It's too much for me. All right, let's get to your questions. Marilee writes, I've been advised to start conversions from an IRA to a Roth IRA. I am 65 years old. My husband is 68. Here's what they have. $1.6 million in a rollover IRA. $130,000 in a Roth, $550,000 in a SEP IRA. It looks like all stocks. Social Security, they're both receiving $46,800 a year plus a small pension. So essentially, if you look at their taxable income right now, they are solidly right in the middle of the 12% bracket. Okay, they've got 40 grand in cash. They're both retired. Only debt is the mortgage on their home, 27 years left on that mortgage. She says, I believe it's at 3.6%. I read about liquidity, and I don't think we have that much. And I would appreciate you and your silent partner's input. You and your show are excellent, positive, love your soothing voice. Thanks very much. Now, Mark, also known as my silent partner and my secret weapon, I think that this is a tough conversion because they do need more money in cash to make the conversion work, right? Here's a couple of ideas just to consider. Think about this. Maybe right now, before minimum required distributions, instead of conversions, maybe what they should do is just pull a little extra money out of the IRA to keep them in the 12% bracket. In other words, their income of, say, $50,000, why not just pull $30,000 a year out of the rollover, pay the tax that's due on that, and then go on and just keep that in cash, or take $20,000 and pay the tax that's due. And maybe that's just the way to do it. What do you think? Maybe it's just like take a little bit of money out. It doesn't sound like they're taking any money out of their rollover right now. So maybe start taking some money out. Maybe it's a smaller amount. And I don't even know if they need, I mean, we don't know if they need the money, but I wouldn't mind them having more like 100 grand in cash rather than 40. Seems low to me too. So I'd like you to take out enough money from the rollover to beef up your cash position. And, you know, you'll pay tax on it, but don't go crazy. You don't have to go crazy. You can take out 30, pay the tax from that money, right? That's due, and put the rest of it in the cash account. And then let's see where you stand in a year or two. Okay, let's do one more before we go to a break. This is from Jen. The subject is the interest rate on credit cards. Here's a question. For people who have excellent credit, what is a low interest rate on a credit card? I'm curious about what the current ceiling and floor rates are. I've insisted on 7%. That seems to be no longer available. Can lower rates be negotiated, and how? So first of all, if you have excellent credit, hopefully that's because you don't carry a balance. But if you do, you know, what's interesting is that I don't know there's not really a floor or a ceiling. There's 0% cards that you can pay off over a certain period of time. I believe that the average interest rate right now is just around 15%. So that's the average. I think that the way you can get a lower interest rate is you can negotiate by picking up the phone and asking for a lower interest rate, or just shopping around and moving it around. Is there any other magic solution to that? No. Although there are certain, I should also note that there community banks and credit unions do tend to have lower cost on their products like credit cards, and they do tend to have higher interest rates when it comes to savings accounts. So I would just shop around and see what you can find. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have excellent credit because you carry a balance and you just pay it off every month, and you pay your like some amount every month. But I'd love to know more about you, and I sure hope that you don't have a credit card balance. But if you do, why don't you follow up with us, send us a note, and let us know some of the details. And that way we can help you try to figure out the best way to whittle that down. Okay? All right, you're listening to Jill on Money. If you have a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com, or you can go to the website, jillonmoney.com, and click the contact button. While you're on the website, check out the resource section. All sorts of neat stuff there, and you can subscribe to our 2 podcasts, Jill on Money and I on Money. If you have podcasts already, just get them wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, we'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are here trying to finish up this show with just one more email question. I love this question because we get it all the time. So it's a great way to conclude the program. It's from Mike, and the subject is mortgage payoff question. And here it goes. I'm at the point in my homeownership where I owe about $96,000 on my mortgage. It is a 4% 30-year note. I have enough money in combined savings and brokerage accounts to pay it off. My question, should I pay it off with my cash, or should I take out a home equity line of credit at 2% introductory rate, use that to pay off the mortgage, and hold on to my cash? Taking the HELOC will lessen my monthly payment substantially. Yes, I would put additional cash towards the home equity line of credit, so that would only be at $50,000. At that point, I would pay down the HELOC aggressively. Okay, Mike, don't be so cute. I don't know how much money you have in cash. If you used the money in savings, would you still have 6 to 12 months of living expenses? Would you? If not, then you can't do it. If not, you have to just, I don't even know if you need to do it. You can make extra payments on the 4% loan. Mark, do you want him to take out a HELOC or not? No, I don't think so either. I just think you pay off the loan as quickly as possible, and then you can go from there. You know what? If you have plenty of money, I'm not sure I would need to know a little bit more about the actual investment account, but if you want to follow up with us, I'd like to know a little bit about what you have saved, what's going on there, and then we can walk you through exactly what we think you should do. All right? But no HELOC, not necessary. Okay, that's it. That's the program. We want to thank you so much for listening. Our music is composed by Joel Goodman. Mark Talercio is our executive producer. And we just would love to encourage you to do one thing. Lift someone up today. Do something nice. It will make that person feel better. It will make you feel better. I promise. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.